Silver closed out yesterday's session at $65.33 an ounce, according to JM Bullion's pricing as of 9:43 p.m. Eastern on August 14th. Gold, at the same source, was sitting at $4,394.54. If you do the division on those two numbers, you get a gold to silver ratio of right around 67-1. That's not a huge distance from the 66 level that's been floating around in some of the commentary this week, and either way, it tells you the same thing. Silver has been quietly closing the gap with gold, and that shift is worth understanding because ratio compression like this has historically lined up with some of silver's strongest stretches. If you're interested in money, finance, or changing your financial future, like this video and subscribe to Money Insiders right now, because what you are about to learn can change the way you see money forever. Let's start with what that ratio actually means, because I know not everyone watching this trades futures or stares at spot charts every day. The gold-silver ratio just tells you how many ounces of silver it would take to buy 1 ounce of gold at current prices. Right now that number is around 67. A few months ago it was higher, meaning silver was cheap relative to gold. As that number drops, it means silver is gaining ground on gold, moving up faster, or gold is cooling off relative to it, or some mix of both. I'll also show you how this ratio has behaved at true extremes, including a spike past 100 that most investors have forgotten about, and what happened in the aftermath of that spike. Because that context matters more than the headline number by itself. Here's what's actually been happening in the market the last few days. Gold pulled back slightly on Friday after touching a 10-week high, with investors locking in some profits following softer inflation data out of the US. Thursday's report on core producer prices came in cooler than expected, which followed a similarly subdued consumer price reading earlier in the week. The combination has traders now pricing in only about a 1 in 3 chance of a rate cut from the Federal Reserve in September, down from better than 50-50 just a week earlier. Lower odds of near-term easing usually take a little wind out of gold's sails in the short run, since gold doesn't pay interest and becomes relatively less attractive when yields stay higher for longer. Silver, because it's driven by both monetary sentiment and industrial demand, hasn't pulled back by nearly as much, and that's part of why the ratio has been compressing. There's also a geopolitical layer sitting underneath all of this. Diplomatic efforts to reopen the Strait of Hormuz have reportedly stalled, and that's kept a floor under safe haven buying in both metals, because any escalation there raises the risk of an energy price shock and reignites inflation worries. At the same time, central banks haven't stopped accumulating gold. China's central bank added to its gold reserves again in July, continuing a streak of purchases that's now stretched past 20 consecutive months. That kind of sustained structural buying from central banks is one of the more meaningful supports under the gold price this cycle, separate from whatever retail investors or traders are doing day to day. Now let's talk about silver specifically, because the industrial demand side of this story is genuinely different from anything gold deals with. Gold is mostly a monetary and investment asset. Silver is that too, but it's also a hard-working industrial metal. It shows up in solar panels, in electronics, and various parts of the electric vehicle supply chain. And demand from those sectors has been climbing for years now as solar installation continues to expand globally, and electronics manufacturing keeps using silver for its conductivity. I don't want to hand you a made-up tonnage figure here, because I haven't independently verified the exact industrial demand numbers for this year. And I'd rather tell you the trend honestly than dress it up with a stat I can't stand behind. What I can tell you with confidence is that industrial demand for silver has been a genuine multi-year growth story, not a talking point invented to sell you something. There's a real reason regulators recently changed how they classify silver, and that's worth understanding before you assume this compression story is just speculative noise. Earlier this year, the U.S. Department of the Interior formally recognized silver as a critical mineral. That's not a symbolic gesture. Critical mineral status typically comes with policy attention around domestic supply chains, and it reflects a broader recognition that silver has become genuinely important to manufacturing, defense, and clean energy infrastructure, not just to jewelry cases and coin collections. That kind of official recognition tends to follow real industrial dependence, not created out of nothing, and it's one more piece of evidence that the demand side of silver's story is grounded in something concrete. So what about supply? This is where I want to be careful, because you'll hear a lot of people throw around dramatic shortage claims. Most of the time, they're not backing it up with anything solid. What I can tell you, based on multiple market sources, is that several precious metals analysts have pointed to a persistent supply deficit in silver over the past few years, meaning the amount being mined and recycled hasn't fully kept pace with total demand from industry, investment, and jewelry combined. Silver is often produced as a byproduct of mining other metals like copper, lead, and zinc, which means miners can't simply ramp up silver output on their own the way they might with a metal that's the primary target of a mining operation. That structural reality is part of why supply has been slow to respond even as prices have climbed. Whether this is a genuine structural shortage that persists for years or something that eventually corrects itself as higher prices pull more supply and more recycled silver into the market is worth digging into honestly, rather than assuming one answer. Higher prices do tend to incentivize more mining investment and more recycling activity over time, which is exactly the kind of market response that historically puts a ceiling on how long any deficit can persist. So while the deficit narrative is real and worth paying attention to, it isn't automatically permanent, and I'd encourage you to treat any specific numeric shortage claim with some skepticism unless it's coming from a source that shows its work. Let's get into some real history now, because context matters enormously here. Silver's story over the past year and a half has been extraordinary by any measure. After spending most of 2024 climbing steadily, silver broke through the $30 mark that may for the first time since 2013. And by that fall, it was approaching $35, which was its high point for the year. Then 2025 happened. The metal's advance accelerated sharply through the back half of that year, and by January of 2026, silver did something it had never done in recorded market history. It broke through the $50 level, a ceiling that had held since the Hunt brothers' cornering attempt drove it to about $49.45 back in January of 1980. And that was tested again in April of 2011 when it reached roughly $48.70 before reversing hard both times. This time was different. Silver didn't just touch $50 and retreat, it blew through it and kept climbing, eventually setting a nominal all-time high of approximately $121.67 on January 29, 2026. Gold set its own record at almost exactly the same time, briefly trading above $5,600 an ounce in that same window. Both metals have since pulled back meaningfully from those peaks. Silver, at $65.33 today, is sitting a little more than 45% below that January high. That's a substantial retracement, and it's worth sitting with for a moment, because it means the metal that grabbed headlines for shattering a 45-year-old ceiling has actually spent most of this year cooling off from that spike, even while remaining dramatically higher than where it started 2024. Now, about that gold-silver ratio and its own history, because this is the part I promised to circle back to. In more typical market conditions over recent decades, that ratio has often traded somewhere in the range of 50 to 80, meaning it usually takes 50 to 80 ounces of silver to equal the value of 1 ounce of gold. But at real moments of panic, it's gone far higher than that. Back in March of 2020, during the initial shock of the pandemic, the ratio spiked to somewhere past 100, meaning silver was historically cheap relative to gold at that moment, because investors were dumping industrial-linked assets like silver while still buying gold as a pure safe haven. What followed that spike was a sharp silver rally over the following year as the ratio compressed back down toward more normal territory. That's the pattern worth understanding. Extreme ratio spikes have tended to resolve through silver catching up, not through gold falling apart. It's not a guarantee it plays out that way every single time, but it's a real historical tendency, not a myth someone made up to sell you coins. So does today's ratio near 67, compressing from wherever it sat a few months back, mean the same setup is repeating? I want to be honest with you here rather than tell you what would make for a more exciting video. A ratio in the mid-60s isn't an extreme reading in the way 100 plus was back in 2020. It's closer to the higher end of what's historically been a fairly normal range. So this compression is meaningful as a signal that silver has been outperforming gold recently, and that industrial and supply dynamics are genuinely supporting the metal. But it's not the kind of screaming, historically rare dislocation that preceded the sharpest silver catch-up rallies of the past. Context and magnitude both matter, and I'd rather give you an accurate picture than an artificially dramatic one. Before you get too excited about any of this, I want to walk through the real risks, because I'm not going to pretend this move is risk-free or that silver only goes up from here. Silver is one of the most volatile major asset classes that exists. It has a long history of round-tripping sharp gains just as quickly as it built them, and both 1980 and 2011 are proof of that, when it approached $50 and then fell hard over the following months and years. The metal you're looking at today has already pulled back more than 45% from its own January peak, so anyone who bought at the top has already experienced how fast this asset can move against you. There's no reason to assume that kind of volatility has gone away, just because the price found a new, higher trading range. There are real macro risks, too. If inflation data keeps coming in cooler than expected, and the Federal Reserve holds rates steady or even signals a more hawkish stance, that tends to pressure both gold and silver, since higher for longer interest rates make non-yielding assets like precious metals relatively less attractive compared to bonds or cash. A resolution to tensions around the Strait of Hormuz, while obviously a good outcome for the world, would likely remove some of the safe haven premium currently baked into both metals. On the industrial side, if global economic growth slows meaningfully, solar installations and electronics manufacturing could soften, which would hit the demand side of silver's story specifically, since gold doesn't have that same industrial demand component working in its favor or against it. There's also the plain reality that silver's market is smaller and less liquid than gold's, which is part of why it tends to move more violently in both directions. A relatively modest shift in investment flows can swing the silver price by a much larger percentage than the same dollar flow would move gold. That cuts both ways. It's part of why silver has been closing the ratio gap so quickly on the way up. And it's exactly the same mechanism that could just as easily work in reverse if sentiment shifts. None of this means silver can't continue higher from here. It just means the ride is genuinely bumpier than gold's, and anyone treating silver as some kind of safe, guaranteed trade hasn't been paying attention to its actual price history. On the opportunity side, the case for silver isn't just hype. The structural supply deficit, if it does persist, is a real tailwind that gold simply doesn't have in the same way. Silver's dual role as both a monetary asset and an industrial input, tied to genuine long-term growth areas like solar power and electronics, gives it demand drivers gold can't fully replicate. The critical mineral designation adds a policy dimension that could shape supply chain investment over the coming years. And historically, when the gold-silver ratio has been elevated relative to its longer-run average, silver has more often than not made up ground over the following year or two, even if that process has rarely been smooth or in a straight line. So what should investors realistically take from all of this? I'm not a financial advisor, and I'm not going to tell you to go buy silver or gold right now, because that decision depends entirely on your own financial situation, your time horizon, and how much volatility you can actually stomach without losing sleep. What I will say is that if you're considering exposure to precious metals, understanding a metric like the gold-silver ratio gives you a useful lens for thinking about relative value between the two, rather than just chasing whichever one has had the flashier headline lately. Some investors use ratio extremes as a signal to rotate between the two metals rather than picking just one. Others simply hold both as a diversification tool and ignore short-term ratio swings entirely. Either approach is defensible, and neither one is right for everyone. What matters most is going in with clear eyes about the risk. Silver in particular has shown it can deliver spectacular gains and then give a meaningful chunk of them back within the same year, sometimes within the same quarter. If you're going to hold either metal or both, think about position sizing that reflects that volatility, rather than betting more than you're prepared to see swing by double-digit percentages in either direction. Precious metals can be a legitimate part of a diversified portfolio, but they carry real risk like any other asset. Nobody watching this video should treat a YouTube analysis as a substitute for doing your own research or talking to a licensed financial professional about your specific situation. To wrap up where we started, silver at $65.33 and gold at $4,394.54 puts the ratio at roughly 67 to 1 as of this recording, a level that reflects real compression from where things stood a few months back. driven by a mix of genuine industrial demand, a persistent, though not permanent supply deficit, central bank gold buying, and shifting expectations around Fed policy. It's not the kind of historic extreme that preceded the sharpest silver catch-up rallies of the past, but it is a meaningful signal worth watching, especially against the backdrop of both metals sitting well off their January highs after one of the most dramatic runs in precious metals history. Whatever you decide to do with that information is up to you, and it should be based on your own homework, not on any single video, including this one. If you learned something new today, make sure to subscribe to Money Insiders and like this video. More powerful financial truths are coming next. This video features an AI-generated host presenting independently researched market analysis.